The dawn of a nation's survival, resistance, and transformation. Here on the southeastern coast of Africa lies Mozambique. Its shores are caressed by the Indian Ocean, its interior a mosaic of savanna, forest, and rivers. This nation's story is profound. It tells of enduring resistance and remarkable transformation, from ancient kingdoms to colonial rule. Mozambique emerged as a sovereign nation, a testament to its people's resilience. Ancient echoes, pre-colonial Mozambique and its rich tapestry. Long before European sails appeared, Mozambique was a land of vibrant activity. Its coastal regions were important hubs in a sprawling trade network. This network connected Africa to Arabia, Persia, and even distant India. Dhows carried gold, ivory, and timber from the African interior. In return, they brought cloth, beads, and ceramics from across the sea. This ancient commerce fostered not just economic exchange but also a rich cultural fusion. Swahili, a Bantu language with Arabic influences, emerged as a lingua franca along the coast. Further inland, powerful kingdoms and chieftaincies held sway. The influence of Great Zimbabwe extended into parts of what is now Mozambique. Local rulers controlled trade routes, managed resources, and maintained social order. These societies were diverse, each with unique customs, languages, and traditions. They were interconnected through trade, alliances, and sometimes conflict. The Zambezi River facilitated movement and trade deep into the continent's heart. Along its banks, communities thrived, cultivating crops and herding cattle. This pre-colonial era was a time of indigenous development. The legacy of these ancient times is still palpable. Archaeological sites reveal glimpses into this rich past. The diversity of languages and cultures found in Mozambique today is a direct inheritance from this pre-colonial mosaic. The Portuguese imprint: arrival, domination, and exploitation. In 1498, Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama landed on the Mozambican coast. His arrival heralded the beginning of a long and complex relationship between Portugal and this part of Africa. Initially, the Portuguese were interested in controlling the lucrative gold trade. They also sought to establish strategic maritime bases. Over the subsequent centuries, Portuguese influence gradually expanded. They established forts and trading posts along the coast. Sofala and Mozambique Island became key centers of Portuguese power. However, their control over the vast interior remained tenuous for a long time. They often relied on alliances with local chiefs or exploited rivalries between different groups. The quest for resources was relentless. Gold, ivory, and increasingly enslaved people were extracted from the land. This extraction had a devastating impact on local populations and economies. The slave trade cast a long shadow over Mozambique. Tens of thousands of Mozambicans were forcibly taken from their homes. They were transported across the Atlantic and to other parts of the Portuguese Empire. Alongside commercial exploitation, missionary efforts were also significant. Catholic missionaries sought to convert the local population to Christianity. By the late 19th century, Portugal moved to consolidate its colonial claims. The Portuguese imprint was becoming deeper, more pervasive, and increasingly oppressive for the indigenous population. Section 4, Under the Colonial Shadow: Struggles and Stirrings of Resistance. Life under Portuguese colonial rule was characterized by profound inequality and hardship for the vast majority of Mozambicans. A system of forced labor known as chibalo was widely implemented. African men were compelled to work on plantations, roads, and railways. They often worked for little or no pay, under brutal conditions. This system disrupted agricultural cycles and family life. It created widespread poverty and resentment. The colonial economy was designed to serve Portuguese interests. Mozambicans were largely excluded from meaningful economic participation, except as a source of cheap labor. Despite the oppressive conditions, the spirit of resistance never fully died. Early forms of resistance were often localized. They included revolts against forced labor, tax collection, or land seizures. As the 20th century progressed, new forms of opposition began to emerge. Educated Mozambicans, some of whom had studied abroad, started to articulate nationalist sentiments. They began to dream of a Mozambique free from foreign rule. The stage was being set for a more concerted and widespread struggle for liberation. Section 5, The Flames of Freedom, FRELIMO, and the War of Independence. In 1962, several smaller nationalist groups merged to form the Mozambique Liberation Front, or FRELIMO. Under the leadership of figures like Eduardo Mondlane, FRELIMO became the main vehicle for the armed struggle against Portuguese colonial rule. FRELIMO established its headquarters in neighboring Tanzania, which provided a safe haven and logistical support. On September 25, 1964, FRELIMO launched its armed struggle. Guerrilla fighters began operations in the northern provinces of Cabo Delgado and Niassa. These regions, bordering Tanzania, offered favorable terrain for guerrilla warfare. The fighters relied on the support of the local population. They sought to establish liberated zones, areas free from Portuguese control. The war was long and brutal. FRELIMO received significant support from various international allies. The Soviet Union and China provided arms, training, and financial assistance. Many African nations, newly independent themselves, offered political and material backing. Inside Mozambique, the war gradually expanded. The assassination of Eduardo Mondlane in 1969 was a significant blow to FRELIMO. However, the movement regrouped under new leadership, including Samora Machel. Section 6. A hard-won dawn independence and the scars of civil war. In April 1974, a military coup in Lisbon, known as the Carnation Revolution, overthrew the Estado Novo dictatorship. The new Portuguese government was committed to decolonization. This dramatic shift in Portugal paved the way for Mozambique's independence. Negotiations between FRELIMO and the new Portuguese authorities moved swiftly. On June 25, 1975, Mozambique officially became an independent nation. Samora Machel became the country's first president. The streets of Maputo, the capital, erupted in joyous celebrations. However, the dawn of independence was soon clouded by new challenges. FRELIMO established a one-party socialist state. It aligned itself with the Soviet bloc during the Cold War. The new government embarked on ambitious programs of nationalization. These policies, combined with an exodus of skilled Portuguese settlers, led to significant economic disruption. Furthermore, Mozambique's support for liberation movements in neighboring Rhodesia and South Africa drew the ire of those minority-ruled states. Tragically, independence did not bring lasting peace. A devastating civil war erupted in 1977. An anti-communist rebel group called RENAMO launched an insurgency against the FRELIMO government. The civil war lasted for 16 brutal years. It caused immense suffering and destruction. Hundreds of thousands of Mozambicans lost their lives. Finally, in 1992, a general peace accord was signed in Rome, bringing an end to the civil war. Section 7. Forging Ahead. Mozambique's Path to Recovery and Modern Aspirations. The 1992 peace accord marked a new chapter for Mozambique. The nation faced the monumental task of rebuilding. Reconstructing the economy and society was crucial. Disarming and reintegrating former combatants was a priority. Millions of refugees needed to return home. Mozambique transitioned to a multi-party democracy. The first multi-party elections were held in 1994. Mozambique has made considerable strides. The country has enjoyed periods of political stability. Significant economic growth has been achieved. Offshore natural gas reserves promise economic transformation. These discoveries have attracted billions in investment. They offer potential for revenue and job creation. Managing this wealth transparently is a challenge. Mozambique continues to face significant hurdles. Poverty remains widespread, especially in rural areas. Access to quality education and healthcare is limited. Yet Mozambique's spirit of resilience remains strong. The nation strives for a prosperous and equitable future.